This is Climate One. I'm Greg Dalton. On October 1st, the world lost a true icon. Jane Goodall was a tireless advocate for conservation, education, and community engagement. She inspired generations of young people to follow in her footsteps. As a young woman, Jane Goodall immersed herself in the study of primates and emerged with discoveries that challenged and changed what we know about our closest animal relatives. Later in life, she became a powerful voice for climate action to protect ourselves and the non-human world. She traveled constantly and died peacefully in her sleep in Los Angeles. Naturally, she was on a speaking tour. She didn't like to travel that much, but she thought it was necessary to spread her gospel. I had the great pleasure of speaking with Jane Goodall on Climate One twice, both times in front of a live audience in San Francisco. In 2017, we celebrated her 83rd birthday, complete with a chimpanzee cake. It amazed me how young people were enthralled by her and how her quiet yet irreverent personality moved audiences. In honor of her passing, we're revisiting my conversation with her last year at the Sidney Goldstein Theater in San Francisco.
I always feel connected, when I come up to give a talk. I sort of open my heart up so that the talks I give are basically the same, but they're different depending on who I'm talking to. And that can only happen if you kind of open yourself to the feeling in the room.
Okay. And you do this all the time. You were in Miami recently, in Atlanta, speaking to thousands of people. How do you keep recharged doing that all the time?
Because I care about the future, because I care passionately about the environment and wild animals, biodiversity, because I've got grandchildren, and probably at least two of them will soon have their own children, because I care about children. But most of all, it's the future of this planet. And do we want to be the one species who comes onto the planet and destroys it?
Right. In almost a couple of generations, we're the only species that kind of destroys our own home with this intellectual brain that we think is so clever. If we're so clever, why are we destroying our own home?
Because we've lost the connection between the clever brain and the human heart, which is love and compassion. The divide between the haves and the have-nots is getting wider and wider. And the few people who have unsustainable lifestyles are doing a tremendous amount to destroy the environment. But then on the other hand, so is poverty. Poverty isn't talked about enough. But the really poor people in the rural areas, they destroy the planet simply to survive, cutting down the trees to make money from charcoal or timber in Africa, or to make more land to grow food for their growing families. And in the urban areas, they buy the cheapest junk food because it's all they can afford. They can't afford, as we can, to ask, where did it come from? How was it made? Did it harm the environment? Was it cruel to animals like factory farms? Is it cheap because of unfair wages? They have to buy the cheapest to survive.
You write and talk a lot about hope. You have a hope cast that I've listened to. It's very good. And I have a complicated relationship with the word hope. And you wrote a book about it. You wrote that hope is misunderstood. It is often seen as passive. So what is hope? Is it a feeling? Is it a skill? And how do you access it?
Well, to me, if we lose hope, we're doomed. Because if everybody loses hope, particularly young people, what's the point of doing anything if you don't hope that what you do will make a difference?
Drink, be merry, tomorrow we die.
Yes, tomorrow we die.
Yeah.
And then the wealthy who don't really care because they only care about the moment will carry on and as they are doing. But, people come to me and they say, well, I'm really depressed. What can I do? I'm just one person. The world's in a mess. And I say, stop thinking that you can change the world. Think about where you are in your own community. What do you care about there? Can you try and do something about that? Maybe you care about litter. Maybe you care about people in the street, homelessness, whatever you care about. See if you can find something to do about that problem. And then you'll find you can succeed, and that'll make you feel good, and you want to do more. And then you can understand around the world there's other people just like you doing what you're doing, and then you get a feeling of, yes, we can.
Bill McKibben recently wrote about a very positive story about a quiet, silent solar revolution in Africa where distributed solar is being deployed. It's not showing up in government statistics, and it's reaching people who need it the most because they have unreliable energy, they can't afford it, and it's really happening. What are some positive stories that you've seen recently?
Well, it's amazing. I mean, I do travel all over the world, just about, and everywhere, and just about every culture, there are people, more and more people, passionate about the environment. I think that's one very positive bit of news, that more and more people understand, more and more people want to do something about the climate. Well, I've got this youth program, and the youth are in this program, they're passionate about making the world better, and they care and they act. It's all about taking action. There's about 1,500 groups in across mainland China, for example. So this understanding of what we're doing to the planet is growing. And that in itself is good news. In 1960, Gombe National Park, where I studied the chimps, was part of the Great Equatorial Forest Belt. And by the end of the 1980s, it was a tiny island of forest. All around were bare hills. The people were cutting down the forest to survive. And that's when it hit me that we need to help these people find a way of making a living without destroying the environment. And we started this program, Tukari. And it's very holistic. It includes not just restoring fertility to overused farmland without chemicals, and growing more food on that newly restored land, but scholarships to give girls a chance of secondary education because they're the mothers affecting their children. Microcredit, which I feel is tremendously important, so that poor villagers can take out a tiny loan to start their own small, environmentally sustainable business. And then when they pay back, and it's over 90% that do pay back in our Tukari program, they're proud. It's mine. I did it. So thanks to Dr. Mohammed Yunus for that.
Yeah, right. I remember, when he spoke at the Commonwealth Club, he said, why do banks make loans to people who have money? They're not the ones who need money. You need to make loans to people who don't have money.
Yeah. And by the way, that program is in 6 other African countries now. So it's raising people out of poverty. And no more bare hills. The trees have come back.
A couple of years ago, you co-wrote the book with Douglas Adams, The Book of Hope, and you wrote about your 4 reasons for hope, one of which is the power of young people, as well as the human spirit, and the resilience of nature, which we've talked about, and the amazing human intellect. But let's talk about young people. A lot of young people are scared, and they're angry, and there's a real mental health crisis among U.S. youth. I don't know if that's international. So what do you say to young people who are scared and worried about what naturally they're going to live in longer than you and I will?
It's very simple. I tell them to join Roots and Shoots, our youth program, because I've seen, I don't think there's a single child, and we are kindergarten through university, who doesn't join Roots and Shoots, take an active role in it, and feel hopeful about the future. Hundreds of them have told me, I feel completely different now. I feel there is hope for the future. The reason it's called Roots and Shoots is because if you think of a big tree, you love trees, I know. You probably love trees. Many people out there. Well, think of your favorite tree. It probably began with a little seed. And when it started to grow, there'd be little roots and a little shoot. And if you picked it up, it would seem so weak and powerless. And yet there's a life force, a magic in that seed, so that those little roots to reach the water can work through rocks and eventually push them aside. And that little shoot to reach the sun can work through a brick wall and eventually knock it down. So we see the young people as the roots and the shoots, and all the problems are the rocks and the walls, and they will break through. The program means that you choose yourself. We don't tell you what to do, but as a group you choose 3 projects, one to help people, one to help animals, one to help the environment. And then you discuss what can we do to improve this in our community and roll up our sleeves and take action. Or you might want to help immigrants. And you will feel great when you know that around the world there are other people, other young people doing the same sort of thing. So if young people are depressed, tell them, of course you're depressed. We know that things are not good. But I've lived 90 years and I've seen bad times and I've seen us get over them. And somehow this indomitable spirit within us will get us through this, along with this intellect, which we have not used wisely, but we are beginning to make a difference. And so important, and you will agree with me, is moving to a plant-based diet. And what I want to say to you, it's not just that the huge areas of land that are cleared to grow food for them. It's not just the particularly cows, the food goes in here and comes out the other end, and that's methane gas, and that's another vicious greenhouse gas that's, affecting climate change. But just think, each one of these animals is an individual. We talk about cows, but this is an individual cow, and this is an individual pig. And I just met a pig called Picasso, not Picasso, Picasso. Picasso loves to paint. Her paintings are selling for over $5,000. Her biggest painting sold for $25,000. And she lives in Cape Town, and she watched a person who rescued her from a factory farm, who's an artist, who set up an easel and gave Picasso a brush in her mouth, and she started to paint. She loves it. As soon as she sees the bucket with paints, she comes running out, and she even dips the brush in different colors to make her marks. And the only thing she's really been taught is at the end, she'll dip her snout in red paint and make her snout mark.
It seems like the food system is so big and so powerful. Yes, okay, if I eat a plant-based diet, but the number of vegetarians is not growing in this country. It's just not. It's around 3%. Is for all the, climatarian and alternative proteins. So how do we change such a big food system?
Compassion and empathy for animals is changing people. There's no question. And the other thing, which is positive, I've become a vegan because I've understood the horrors that go on in dairy farming and
separating young newborns from their
horrible,
parents.
and the conditions like the mothers are kept in is absolutely horrible. And the same with laying chickens. It's absolutely, they're in a tiny space like this, and their egg drops through a wire bottom. And I know chickens, and we have chickens in Africa. They have personalities. They're all different, very different. We have a cockerel called Tyson because he attacks you every time you appear. But anyway, so that's one side of it. But I think probably right now, I don't know if you agree with me, but more powerful is the devastating effect on the environment and the CO2 emissions, which come from the whole of agricultural farming, actually. And then when you realize the difference, when you get to permaculture and you get to agroforestry, and everybody says you can't feed more people like that, but you can grow more food that way. And we don't need genetically modified food. And the other positive thing, when I first became vegan, the food was revolting. It was just, you got a wilted lettuce leaf or a bit of half-cooked asparagus or something. But now you can't tell the difference.
You mentioned you have a great-grandchild on the way. If you were young today, how would you approach thinking of having children? Because some young couples are saying they're choosing not to. Fertility rates are dropping.
Well, that would have to be an individual choice. But the answer is, if you're thinking about having a child, get involved in programs to protect the environment for your child's future.
If you're going to do it, make a world for them. You believe that, change happens from inside, that in the climate conversation, there's lots of naming and shaming, right? Judging people. Oh, you ate a hamburger. Oh, you flew on an airplane. Tisk, tisk, tisk. Not so sure I've done that and learned the hard way that people in my life that doesn't work. People resent that. So how do you, if change needs to happen from the inside, how can you ignite that internal change?
Well, when I meet people who I think, I personally think have got the wrong idea, that they like climate change deniers and things like that. I have found, and I think I was always made this way, that it's no good pointing fingers and being angry and making them feel bad, or especially in front of their peers, because they're not going to listen. They're going to be angry. So instead of battling with their head and telling them why they're wrong and why what they're doing is affecting this, that, and the other, you've got to reach the heart. And the only way I know how to reach the heart is by telling stories. And in order to tell a story to a powerful CEO or government official, you've got to know a little bit about them to find the right story. And if you find the right story, you may not actually know at the time that you did reach the heart, but sometimes you learn afterwards that that person changed because of that story.
You transcend a lot of the political and tribal boundaries that we have in our culture today. And you also talk with not just deniers, because that's a really small part, it's less than 10% at least of America, but you do talk with Republicans who might have a different view, who might not deny climate change, but not think it's a big deal, or the markets will solve it, or technology will solve it. So how do you reach those kinds of people? Tell about your conversations with Republicans, because so few environmentalists talk across divides these days.
Well, the people in power and politics have a role to play in what we do to tackle climate change and all the other dark problems we face today. So many people are fed up with politics, and they don't care particularly about any of it. They don't even bother to read about the candidates. They just don't care. So they don't vote. And the more and more people who don't vote, then the harder it will be to vote for those people who care the most about your future. So vote for nature. Your vote matters. I mean, this is the important thing. Every single vote matters. And you need to register and you need to vote for the person you believe will be most likely to care about nature and the future of the planet.
So, Jane, I've heard you say that when you were growing up, you were encouraged by adults in your life to set your dreams on things that you could accomplish as a girl. The U.S. may finally elect a woman president in about 6 weeks. We don't know. As an iconic woman who has done so much for women in science, what do you think about this particular moment?
Well, all I know is that when I was very young, women wouldn't have dreamed really of doing what women are doing today. We still have further to go, but in some countries it's terrible, as we know, in Afghanistan and so on. But women all around much of the world have a much stronger say in what goes on in their country, in their family. And I just was fortunate in having an amazing mother. And when I dreamed of going to Africa when I was 10, because I was in love with Tarzan, and he went and married the wrong Jane. And so everybody laughed at me except my mother. She said, if you want to do something like this, then you've got to work really hard, take advantage of every opportunity. If you don't give up, hopefully you find a way. And many women have said to me, that encouraged me to do what I've done. And so, women now have as much opportunity to rise to the top as men do in some countries like the US.
Did you find a Tarzan when you went?
Well, I knew there wasn't a Tarzan. My imagined Tarzan, I could never have met anybody like that.
You're 90, and you've talked about your final chapter and what's the great beyond. Our culture avoids talking about death, yet death is integral part of nature, part of indigenous cultures who have sorts of rituals around it. So as you look at the next decade, and I hope we sit here when you're 100, how do you think about your next chapter?
Well, I was asked this question once in an audience much bigger than this, and this woman said something about what was my next adventure. And so I thought, this was about 4 years ago. So I thought, what is my next adventure? And I thought for a moment, and I said, dying. And it was a kind of deathly harsh, and then a few titters. And I said, well, when you die, there's either nothing, it's the end, or there's something. And things have happened to me in my life that I feel there is something. And if there is, I can't think of a greater adventure than dying.
Climate One is a production of the Commonwealth Club. Our team includes Brad Marshland, Jenny Park, Ariana Brocious, Austin Colon, Megan Basilia, Kusha Navadar, and Rachel Lacey. Our theme music is composed by George Young. I'm Greg Dalton.